Hello and welcome. I thank you so much for your patience. I really do truly appreciate it. We had a kind of a time mishap, but we do have Dr. Stanton. Thank you. But thank you for attending the multi-state licensure and telehealth for mental health practitioners featuring Dr. Elizabeth Stanton. I'm your host, Andrea Camp, sales manager with Therapy Sites, and we specialize in building websites and online marketing solutions for mental health professionals. Got to slow down. I'd like to personally welcome each and every one of you to this free educational event. We are really excited here to have all of you here today and to welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Elizabeth Stanton. Dr. Elizabeth Stanton is a licensed psychologist from California. She graduated from San Diego University and Wesleyan University, Southern California Seminary. And during the last 12 years, Dr. Stanton has worked to promote accessible quality learning and student success in higher education. Her roles have included Vice President for Academics, Department Chair, Associate Professor, WCCUC Accreditation Liaison Officer, and Supervisor to Student Life, Campus Services, and Campus Government Relations. She participates in community efforts to address violence and other areas of collective concern. Currently, she has a private practice in San Diego that supports the needs of individuals, couples, and families. She also serves as an instructor, coach, and content developer for Triad. During today's session, Dr. Stanton is going to ask some questions of you, and we'd love to hear your feedback and participation. So if you'd like to take a look at the GoToWebinar control panel, on there you'll see a questions tab. Feel free to use this tab to answer any questions, ask any of your own questions, and make any comments along the way. After the webinar has been concluded, we do have a quick survey. We'd love to hear your feedback. There will also be a recording of this session available, so if anybody's interested, please let us know. Now that we have all that taken care of, let's meet our presenter, Dr. Elizabeth Stanton. Take it away, Dr. Stanton.
Right, thank you so much. And yes, I'm glad we figured out the timing here. I even have to take it myself so I don't just start speaking so quickly. We gotta see smoke coming from the screens. But thank you all for being here, and thank you for holding out and allowing us to get started a few minutes late. I have tons of information that I want to be able to share with you this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. And as mentioned, we're going to be able to have a moment for questions and such towards the end. So if there's anything that I'm covering that you have a question on or something that I haven't, please feel free to put that in the chat so that we have a moment to address that. Now, with multi-state licensing and telehealth, there's lots involved, some details that are going to be much more specific to your particular state, but I do want to give you kind of an overview of what to look forward to if you're considering this as an option to increase your reach, right? I was going to say professionalism, but it gives us an opportunity to reach a lot more people as well. But before I jump into the goods and the nuggets of that, I do want to just explain to you just a little bit about Triad. Triad, as mentioned, I've been a coach, content provider, and served many different roles for many years with the company, and have been able to take part in helping many people get past the exam and then turn into this wonderful world of professionalism. But Triad provides education, community, and career resources to behavioral and mental health professionals, institutions, organizations, and even employers. We have over 45 years of experience when it comes to supporting behavioral and mental health professionals. And we're excited to broaden our community today through our partnership with Therapy Sites and to help you, of course, navigate the world of multi-state licensing and give some tidbits about some of the best practices with telehealth. Now, that said, I think I kind of already went over the agenda, but specifically, we're going to talk about the benefits of multi-state licensing, why it is something that I think all licensed individuals should consider. Even if you're not moving anywhere, it's still something to broaden the horizon. Some of the course requirements to be thoughtful of as you embark upon this endeavor, and then the discussion of license portability and what that means. And then, of course, we'll follow up with telehealth and some best practices and leave some time for questions as well. When it comes to multi-state licensing, now I wanted to kind of take a poll. I don't know if this will work to see who's out here. Are we, is it MFT, psychologists, LCSWs? Not really specifically matters because we're going to cover all the different groups, but just to just to note that we're all in this business in a sense to help people. And so when we consider the benefits of multi-state licensing, I would say that it does in some ways require an entrepreneurial type of mindset, but even more so just a desire to want to help the most people in a way that is efficient depending on um, wherever your perspective experience is coming from. So having said that, the multi-state licensing is, I guess, a way to think of doing the most good for the most people. And some of the benefits are that and for sure, it's going to enable mental health professionals to practice in new states when relocating between different states. That's a given. But also, when we consider what has occurred ever since we went through the pandemic and COVID, et cetera, there is, I think, a new appreciation for the flexibility or portability, as we'll talk about in a moment, for us to be able to quickly begin practicing and treating folks that may be in a different state. It also is going to allow us to, again, increase our capacity to treat people via telehealth, which then allows not just greater accessibility for the folks that need services, but it also allows you as the professional to increase your expertise perhaps in a particular area. Some of us maybe want to specialize in, let's just say generally, maybe eating disorders, right? Maybe there's a passion for helping folks with that struggle, and you find that in your neighborhood or particularly in your city, what you have access to location wise doesn't really give you a broad client base for folks that are looking for services in that area. But perhaps if you were able to expand that client base to telehealth in another state, and for some of us, even just being able to include more people in our state, would be able to increase your expertise and practice in that particular area. So that's just one example in terms of a diagnosis to treat. But when we just consider if you have a niche, if it's family, if it's children, this may also increase your accessibility to those various individuals. And then we also are able to, in terms of establishing a standard of a standard of practice for mental health, when we are licensed in multiple states, right, it obviously goes toward the benefit of more accessibility and our access to more clients and patients. But then also we have the safety net mechanism of being licensed so that we can ensure that protection of the public, right? Like no matter what state we're in, that we're doing, again, the most good for the most people ethically and to a very high standard. And then we also want to think about that when it comes to licensing in different states, those boards that we will essentially be answering to have various requirements and such that are going to be particular to this multi-state licensing experience. And so with that, we're going to talk just a little bit about the complexities. So I think the benefits beyond what we've talked about also include just in terms of entrepreneurship and building business, it allows you to expand your practice into various places. And if that's something that's of interest, then this is an avenue to do so. Now, the complexities when it comes to obtaining licensure in multiple states have to do with a few things. First of all, just keep in mind that every state is different because that's just how our world has been set up in terms of the United States. And so each state has a governing body that will essentially set up the guidelines and monitor us as practitioners in said state. So when we're starting this journey, one thing to keep in mind is that licensure titles are not always the same, right? We don't want to just assume that an LMFT, right, a licensed marriage and family therapist, is going to transition the same title-wise in another state. It seems like it would be a given, but they haven't made this process super easy, right? It's not streamlined at all. And as you begin to embark upon this, you might even experience a little frustration with how not streamlined it is, because one day we'll get there, but we're just not there yet. So being thoughtful of the licensure titles, I remember, I don't want to say which state because it might have changed now, but it was interesting to see that like a licensed psychological associate my brain, I'm living in California, so a psychological or a psych associate has to do with someone who's pre-licensure, right? They're obtaining their hours to get to the exam. But in this particular state, the licensed psychological associate was actually someone who was like that. They kind of had it tiered in the way that you would be licensed in that state. And so that was like if you were in your first 5 years of being licensed, that you would be listed as a psychological associate. So that's just an example of, making sure that you dig in a little deeper when it comes to the titles so that you don't maybe, turn away from an opportunity given the name of the actual license. Because if you look at what's afforded, right, to that particular role, it's probably similar to what you, or could be similar to what you're expecting. So that's one piece. And then also thinking about the scope of practice. So assuming that one license affords an individual to do in one state, that may not automatically transition into another. And so being thoughtful of what will this license allow me to do, or what limitations will come along with this particular license as it relates to the individual states. Now, as I'm saying all of this, I guess I should also drop in that just as much as you've become familiar with your board of behavioral sciences, psychology, social work, whatever the entity is, you want to be just as familiar with that same website and entity with the state that you're considering becoming licensed in as well. As we all know, things change on a regular basis, if not, or at least in the least annually. There's various changes to license requirements that are happening. And of course, it's our responsibility to make sure that we're aware of what those are. So as you embark upon this consideration of becoming licensed in another state, remembering also that we want to go directly to that state's .gov website, right, to make sure it's official, that you're getting the official information from that particular state. And I stress that also because upon just a typical search, an internet search, you might find that there's different companies, website things that look like they are an easy way to be able to apply to a state or to get the state's guidelines or requirements for licensure. The safest bet is to go to the actual board. So that said, in visiting that state's board, you will also find that there are various exam requirements and even education requirements that are not, again, unfortunately, it's not streamlined from state to state. So some states, in terms of supervised professional experience, some states require that students complete 4,000 hours of supervised experience. And then I've seen other states that require as little as 1,500. If you feel cheated because you were in the wrong state, don't worry. But anyway, it's just interesting, right? That wide, vast of requirements. So being thoughtful of that. Not to say that if you were in a state that required what tends to be the typical or average 3,000 hours, that if you were to now want to be licensed in a state that required 4,000, the assumption shouldn't be that now you have to go back and all of a sudden do some supervised hours. That's not the case. But you just want to know what these requirements are so that then you can speak to how you've already met that depending on what your experience is. Now, there are some variations in terms of license portability and where you could say that some of these requirements could actually be sort of void in your case. Now, there are many states that require a minimum time of being licensed in one state before they will endorse you in another. So thinking of it like this, we all, go for our driver's license. Not everyone, but right, people will obtain a driver's license, and then the understanding is that if you drive in another state, that your license, your driver's license in that state is endorsed, right? Or it's kind of a reciprocal type of relationship for driver's licenses between state to state. And unfortunately, that's not exactly the case when it comes to our licenses to practice when it comes to mental health. And instead, what I found is that many states will say, well, if you've had your license for at least this long, which tends to be about maybe 5 years, some longer, some are 15 years and even more. I'm telling you, it's a wide variety. But some states will have a minimum time that you've been licensed in one state in order for your license to sort of just cross over like your driver's license would in another state. And what I mean is that you don't have to go in and, you don't have to take the EPPP again. They're not even going to consider that. They just look at your license and then, and in many ways, just endorse it in their state. But again, every state has a different requirement. So when we talk about some of these complexities, a part of that is also licensure portability. So licensure portability is essentially the ability for a practitioner to take the qualifications for a license in one state and then apply them for the requirements to another. You might find terms like reciprocity or portability used interchangeably, or again, finding that sometimes the phrase license through endorsement may also be used. Those three different, well, the phrase and those other two words, license through endorsement, reciprocity, and portability, all mean that your license as it currently stands in your state will be accepted in another state. But again, because there's been so many variations in what the requirements are from state to state, this process theoretically is great, but practically in the way that it gets applied for us as we try to go about this can be a little disjointed because of the various requirements in different states. So there have been a few routes of trying to streamline this for individuals, and one is obtaining what's called the Certificate of Professional Qualification. Now, this is something that would apply to a licensed psychologist. And right now, I want to say that there's at least 43 different states that are a part of this sort of national register that will accept this, what they refer to as the CP2. And essentially what that means is that once a person has reached 5 years of licensure, they may go back to the ASPPB, right, the people who house our licensure information, and they may apply for the CPQ. And essentially, that would say that you meet the requirements of having been licensed for 5 years. You can't have any mark or ding against you in terms of the board, right? There's been no concerns or no ethical conflicts or disciplinary actions against you. And essentially, it's kind of like you get this stamp of approval with the CPQ, and then say now you're considering applying to another state, you can present the CP2 as a matter of being endorsed or your license from your state being easily accepted into the other state. And it's, again, a way of just getting that stamp of approval. But again, that has its requirements, which I would encourage you to look up. But at the very least, it is the 5 years minimum of being licensed and with no disciplinary actions. Now, another sort of stamp of approval that can be really helpful is becoming certified in a particular area. I believe there's 13 different areas now that the American Board of Professional Psychology will allow a person to pursue for certification. So maybe someone is, I am board certified as I'm not, but I'm saying theoretically, hypothetically speaking, if a person was to say that they are board certified in forensic psychology, right? That's another sort of stamp of approval that when it comes to this portability or reciprocity or license through endorsement, that kind of helps the process move along because you're showing the state that you're applying to that you already have good standing and rapport, not just with your state, but then nationally as well when we consider the ASPPB. Okay, now there are also registers for there's a national register of health services providers in psychology, and then there's also some of these similar types of registers that may be applicable for those who are in the world of social work or in the world of counseling. But it's worth just kind of plugging around, right, using some of these keywords to see what is available for your particular license and how that can be reciprocated, what is the portability of your license? I can't even talk. Okay, now when it comes to psychology, there is, and especially since 2020, there has been a huge support for PsyPact. And PsyPact is the Psychology Interjurisdictional Compact, which really functions much like what I was describing with the driver's license. And what PsyPact has been determined to do, and they've been quite successful, is to get as many states that are a part of the United States of America to be able to endorse this compact, in that there would be reciprocity for someone who has a license in one state to be able to conduct telepsychology without limitations in other states, and then be able to conduct a temporary in-person or face-to-face practice of psychology as they're maybe moving into another state or crossing state boundaries. So this is an attempt, or an association, I guess we could even say, that's come together to really streamline the process for psychologists to be able to have that interstate experience with their license. Now, PsyPact, as I said, is making some very aggressive efforts to include all states in the United States of America. And as of today, they have accomplished this with 42 states. California is still not one of them, but and I want to say, I think Louisiana, maybe, I don't want to call out other states that I have it wrong, but I know those two for sure don't participate yet, but they are hopefully still working on bridging that relationship so that it can be something that the whole country participates in. And if that would be the case, then someone would essentially apply to participate as a provider of PsyPact. And then once that process is complete, then they would be able to essentially conduct telepsychology throughout the different states that participate, and then have the ability to have a more streamlined process if they were moving from one state to the other and becoming licensed in that state. And essentially what it would mean is that a person wouldn't have to wait whatever the time period is for the other state to give them a license, or grant them, licensure to practice there. So that's one of the avenues that's been taken for psychologists. Then there's also the AAMFT, the Association of American Marriage and Family Therapists. And this attempt for licensure portability has been very similar to what PsyPact has done, but to create a way for there to be what they would refer to as an unrestricted license for someone to be able to practice in another state and have their qualifications deemed as equivalent, rather than what has been happening more so lately in the MFT world of trying to become multi-state licensed, is that many states have a statement that a person has to prove that their qualifications are substantially equivalent, which is very subjective. There's not a real clear guideline to what each state would consider substantive or substantially equivalent. And so this is an attempt by the AAMFT to be able to streamline that, so that every state, that there's more objectivity to this process rather than subjectivity, and that people are able to and have a more standardized experience when it comes to this licensure portability piece. Now, again, there's lots of jargon that comes along with this. And so if you're looking up, license portability or license reciprocity, it may not come up that way, right? But look into the various states and see what their language is about becoming licensed in another state, right? Again, it may not come up immediately and clearly, but some digging will give you the information you need. There's also something similar with the, as I mentioned, with the world of social work as well. The ASWB, the Association of Social Work Boards, is also working on an agenda that's specific to streamlining this process. So if you're already licensed or registered in one state, most boards have provisions for licensure by endorsement. And again, in this world, we talk about it as reciprocity, but because it varies from state to state, it can get a little tricky. And there's, again, attempts to streamline this. The reason I keep saying that there's attempts is because it hasn't happened completely fully in none of the areas, right? Not in psychology, not in social work, but there are organizations that are really working toward achieving that. So being thoughtful of also in the world of counseling, there's the ACA, and the ACA is working as well to create a system, and this is the American Counseling Association, and their goal is to enable licensed professionals to move to another state easily and maintain their license without having any lapse in time or ability to practice, and also to provide telehealth in multiple states without the need for multiple licenses. So this is again where a person could be licensed in one state, say perhaps California, and without having to go through the steps or the fees that are required to become actually licensed in another state, the ACA would like to create a portability model where your license will give you the access to clients that are in another state without having to actually be licensed there. So again, it definitely, there's a lot brewing, and hopefully we'll have some finished product soon that's really beneficial to us as practitioners and of course the people that we want to be able to help. And so there's also the idea of being able to work across the nearest state line without having to have a license in that state. And this, I think, was prompted much by COVID and that experience of, well, we don't have to go there, but just the limitations that were put on when it came to mental health services, and that this would, again, in the event of crisis or whatever the need be, that a practitioner would be able to practice easily in that other state. Okay, so really quickly, I just want to make sure you have an idea of what some of these other, or I skipped it, sorry, some of these other organizations. On the same slide, the second part, I did the ACA, but also the National Counselor, the National Board for Certified Counselors also has an endeavor that is similar to the AAMFT and the ACA to make it so that practitioners are able to easily transition into other states. All right, we're moving along. This is great. Now, when it comes to telehealth, which I think is a conversation that's appropriate when we talk about multi-state licensing, because that is now we've kind of been given this gift of how we can really take advantage of multi-state licensing and be able to, again, have greater access to more individuals, but then they have greater access to us as well. So with telehealth, there's a variety of different I would say best practices to consider, but also in terms of multi-state licensing, to be thoughtful of those various organizations, PsyPACs, ACA, and also the national board, the NBCC. Sorry, I was about to go news talk with you, but NBCC. These are organizations that are making it so that, yes, there's the one prong of becoming licensed in multiple states, right? And considering all of the different sort of tasks that are associated with that. But then also that if your goal is to just be able to expand and interact with more people and be able to help more people, then maybe as we move along with these organizations, there may be soon a way to be able to have access to those people without having to go through the fees and the extra paperwork, etc. So it kind of just depends on your own personal goal, but we have options, and I think that that's one of the great things. Now with telehealth, when we think about some of the practical applications and in terms of multi-state licensing, obviously we get to have access to more people, etc. But then also when we think about the idea of the benefits for the clients, right? So whether this is accessing people that are outside of your state, but even for those who might actually be in the same city and close enough that they could come to your office, but for whatever reason there's some barriers to that. Telehealth has really broadened the horizon for access to mental health care. And while everyone has their preferences, I know some folks still prefer in person, some only want to do telehealth now. It varies. I think that it allows us to give people what they need and essentially meet them where they're at, right? And so considering the option of telehealth, generally speaking, whether or not we were going for multi-state licensing can be really beneficial when we think about how that is a benefit to the clients or the people we're working with. Now, how that might look in private practice, again, whether it's expanding to other states or working within the people in your own, thinking about, the changes that might be made to your informed consent form, or even how those forms are then communicated or distributed to the people who are never going to actually step into your office. So being thoughtful of that so that you might have a streamlined process if you don't already, or maybe rethinking what your process is, to, include the necessary statements in your informed consent about the type of, platform that you'll be using, being thoughtful of the security certificates that are required of various platforms, and making sure that when it comes to HIPAA, that we're in line with the guidelines that are required for that. But then also making sure that even within um, working with someone in telehealth, that we still consider that it's our job to ensure their confidentiality. And this is just a tidbit of maybe even just a plain reminder that sometimes the people we're working with, they don't understand that how important it is to be in a space by themselves. And so maybe to even as a regular thing, kind of implement that in your telehealth sessions of, hey, are you alone? I've had some interesting instances where it was clear the person was not alone. And again, we want to be thoughtful of that for their confidentiality. And so maybe taking some of those extra steps, which could be uncomfortable, but necessary. And again, being thoughtful of, if we're doing this in various states, if you're someone who's going to obtain the additional license and then implement telehealth in that other state, it is still our responsibility as the practitioner to be aware of whatever the guidelines are for that particular state. Now, with all of that said, I think I made it through all of my information quickly. So thank you for that and for listening quickly. But I do want to stop here and see if we should do questions now before we go through this information.
Yeah, I can take over, sure, and then we can circle back to questions for sure. So thank you so much, Dr. Stanton. I appreciate you running through all this information. Obviously, we have a ton of participants that are super eager to learn more about multi-state licensing. So again, just what a great presentation. Again, thank you for sharing all your knowledge. You shared so much valuable information, and I know that we appreciate it at Therapy Sites, and I know our participants appreciate it as well. So with that being said, at Therapy Sites, we work with mental health professionals like yourselves to help them create a professional looking website and to ensure they can be found online where and when their clients are searching in order to help increase new client acquisition. We encourage the practices we work with to build a website that's a reflection of themselves, but also to help them create a marketing strategy that allows them to achieve their goals. Our solutions make it easy to schedule appointments online, create a network of referrals via social media, and even the ability to interact with clients from virtually anywhere from our telehealth platform. As a special thank you for being here today, we are extending a special webinar offer for 2 free months of SEO and telecounseling services with Therapy Sites. Please also do take our poll if you'd like us to contact you to learn more about Therapy Sites to see how we can help attract more clients to your practice. You can also send us a quick email at webinar@therapysites.com, or feel free to call us at 866-255-8745. Feel free to provide us your feedback about our event today via our post-webinar survey we'll be sending out. We really appreciate you taking the time today to participate in the event. And again, I do apologize for the late start. But thank you for sticking with us. I really do appreciate it. So if you would like to learn more about Therapy Sites and how we can help attract more new clients, feel free to send us an email or give us a shout at 866-255-8745. So as Dr. Stanton mentioned, we did have quite a few questions. So let me go back to that kind of question section and let's see what we can do. All right, so the question here was, is there a number of hours per year that an LMFT can work in another state without actually having licensure in those states? I don't know, good question.
No, that's a great question. And I'm probably going to say this so many times, so forgive me, but it depends on the state. So,
Okay.
So every state has a different number of hours, or sometimes it's broken up into days that you're allowed to work in that state before becoming licensed in that state, but it varies. So I would look at the state you're looking into and see. And then sometimes there's language with your own state about how long, given your license where you are, that you're allowed to do that in another place. So it's kind of a two-pronged answer there, or the information would come from both of the states.
All right. Perfect. So next question, if my client in my state goes to college in another state, can I still provide telehealth from my state?
Very good question. And so that again can get a little tricky. I think generally speaking, the idea is where your client or patient resides, that is where the license needs to align with. And then that's where things get sticky, right? Because a college student may physically reside in Colorado, but be a legal resident of their other state, right? And so that I think is where it can get a little dicey, but leaning more towards I guess, the legality and where they are actually a resident. But there's
Hmm.
also language for that within some of the. I've actually seen that in some board Q&As, or and if it's always worth just a quick maybe email to even your malpractice insurance provider and just ask them, hey, what do I do in this scenario? Just to make sure, so you have some, written communication about what to do. But I think that it comes down to a matter of where does that person legally reside.
Okay. That makes sense. And we had a second question that was very similar. So it just depends on where that college student resides versus where they're going to college. So that one, we got 2 questions done.
Yes.
Let's see. All right. As an Illinois LSW and QMHP, does my national provider identifier number, would that allow me to work with clients in other states? And you may or may not know, you might have to suggest them checking it out.
Well, I would check out because the letters you listed, I'm not familiar with that license,
Okay.
but I would say that, again, I think many of us would have an NPI, right? The National Provider Identification Number. That doesn't afford us any rights. It's just an identification. So
Okay.
I think that number may trail from state to state to state because you are still that provider. But what you're allowed to do in the various states, I would still defer back to the board and find
Okay.
out what your specifics are.
All right. This would be completely down my alley. Can I hire someone to complete the applications for me? So maybe somebody within the office, does it have to be the provider that's completing the applications for multi-state licensure, or would we be able to utilize maybe staff members within our practice office?
I'm not familiar with any guidelines or regulations about who's filling the application out, right? I
Okay.
think what would matter is whatever that very last statement is. At the very end, before you sign your name, and it says, I am the person or I am not, just to
Yep.
be thoughtful of what you're signing. But I don't think that that's an issue. I think what could be really helpful too is if you have someone in the office that can put together maybe like the various requirements for different
Uh-huh.
states, and so that then you're kind of always aware of like, okay, for this state we have to do 37 hours of CEUs.
Sure.
This state I got to do, that kind of thing could be helpful also.
Perfect. Okay. Let's see. Do I go to my respective board for the application for licensure portability, or do I go to AAMFT or ACA?
I would start with the ACA or AAMFT to determine kind of where they are in that process, just to kind of familiarize yourself with what's happening in that arena. And then the actual board would be, oh, I'm sorry, let me go back. If it's for the CPQ, the qualification piece, that would be the ASPPB because they have all of our licensing information. Um, and then if it's a matter of endorsement from the other state, it depends on what they've done with the ACA or the AAMFT to become a part of whatever that compact is going to be.
Okay. Is there any kind of database that summarizes the telehealth rules for each state? I have found it very complicated to dig into the requirements from all the other states and find information that is needed.
I haven't found one. I think that'd be great. Maybe whoever was asking the question earlier about people in the office, maybe we can get somebody in the office to no, but I would also say though that even if I were able to recommend some website that put all of the requirements together, I would still say go back to the board to make sure because those things change. You know what I mean? Like they change every year. They have updates, and so I would say maybe lessen the work on yourself and only look at the states that you're actually going to be licensed in, right? So that it's not overwhelming. But I haven't found anything that streamlines it yet. No.
That would be something to create maybe.
Mhm.
So lots of questions in regards to, do I go to SIPAC? Do I go to ASWB? Do I go to AAMFT? Do I go to the state board? And I think what you're saying is that it's easiest to go to the state where you want to be licensed to get the state requirements, because
Yes,
that may not necessarily correlate with some of these national organizations.
exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
all right. Is there a multi-state license compact for marriage and family therapists, and where I can find more details regarding participating states?
So I think that that's something that the AAMFT is working on, but not
Okay,
something that's as, I don't think they've made as many strides as SIPAC just yet in terms of being like an actual interstate compact piece, but
all right,
they're moving along.
okay. And then it's just, again, basically about state requirements. So can you point us in the right direction for a website for state requirements? And you're basically saying you'd have to go to the state of California's board, the state of Illinois, the state of Michigan,
Yes.
wherever you might be looking. Okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty straightforward. I mean, I haven't looked at every single state, obviously, right? But then some of the ones that I've inquired about, it takes a little bit of digging on their website, or maybe even like a search on their website for out
Yep.
of state. You know what I mean? If you
Okay.
just look out
Yeah.
of state, that might get you to out of state licenses and what the path is, depending on how long you've been licensed, et cetera.
Okay. And then this is more along the coaching side. And how do I stay in compliance with the social work license? So this person is LCSW in Texas, lives in Illinois, not necessarily providing mental health services, really more so coaching. And clients understand that. But the question was, how do I stay in compliance with the social work license?
Well, I think in terms of staying in compliance with the social work license is to be particular about using whatever, kind of language they lean towards when we're making the distinction between I am not doing therapy, right? I am your coach. So that to
Right.
be very specific. And then I think, again, being considerate of the way that one might present themselves in a business card or on a website, et cetera, to delineate between being a coach and license.
Okay. I'm in a state that does not participate in SIPAC. Can I apply to a state that does?
Good question. I think that that's a great idea. Yes.
Let's see, just trying to make sure we got into all of these. The session will be recorded, so you guys will all have access to that. There was a number of questions regarding that. And then there was a number of questions that asked about CE credit. I'm not sure if Triad offers CE credit for webinars like this. I know Therapy Sites isn't offering CE credit, but not sure if that's offered through Triad.
I don't think Triad is offering. I don't think there's any CEU credit for this
Okay.
particular webinar, but there are options for a variety of other topics that I know that's offered on our website, on Triad's website. But yeah, not specifically this. But that also brings me to one note about CEUs as it
Yes.
relates to various states and making sure that embarking upon this multi-state licensure journey, that we're thoughtful also of once we get licensed in said state, that we have to be thoughtful of the different requirements to remain licensed, right? The requirements for renewal. And sometimes that varies, or it does definitely vary depending on the state.
Okay, perfect. I think that pretty much covers all of the questions. Most of this was just in regards to recording, CE credits. Let me see, these are the last couple. So again, Dr. Stanton, thank you so much. I really do appreciate you getting logged on. I know there was some, conflict in the very beginning, but thank you so much for getting on and getting us logged in right away as you could. And again, all the attendees, thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon. We really do appreciate it. Any final words from you, Dr. Stanton?
Well, one, of course, thank you, and thank you for the flexibility. That was great teamwork in this story right away. But also for those that are, that are still here and attending, and that may listen, I guess, later, to really consider the benefit of being able to expand our license, right? We've worked really hard to come to the place of licensure, and after a couple of years of being in practice and doing our thing, maybe it is, time to consider what does that look like, and just expanding our horizons. I like the question
Right.
about, well, my state doesn't offer SIPAC. Can I apply to one that does? Yeah,
Yeah.
let's really think about ways to um, to increase our reach with, you know, great care and quality services, and to be able to maybe just challenge yourself if you're kind of feeling like, I don't know, why not? You know, I think that would be a good question. So maybe that's what I'll leave everyone with is why not?
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody take care. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Again, thanks for being patient with us getting everything rolling here this afternoon. Again, thanks for attending, and we will be in touch soon. Thanks.
Thank you.